chances. I know that I'm falling. I'm best when I'm next to you. 'Cause I'm heating up while you're reading my mind. I know that I'm stalling, don't leave me behind. I'm still on the run, you don't know where I hide. I'm giving you eyes, but you misread the signs. And I can't rewind, baby. I'll search everywhere for you. And I can't rewind, baby. I'll search everywhere for you. And I can't rewind, baby. I'll search everywhere for you. And I can't rewind, baby. Don't blink when I'm watching you. And I can't rewind. Watch you from afar, just can't stop.
The biggest moment for me, as a dev or, as someone that discovered code was the opportunity for me to be able to instruct a computer to do something. I took the game from the internet and I created a little container that was running as an application on the Linux desktop we were using back then. And then I was like, oh, how do I get to distribute this code? So that's when I learned about GitHub, and I hosted the code, and eventually a lot of people started downloading it and getting to even contribute back to the code. Something that I felt like was just solving my problem and people around my community sort of became something that had like a global impact.
I'm seeing Vue applications being used here and there, even used by NASA on their Mars mission.
So the major moment for me was seeing people who are building accessibility tech and sharing it online and showing each other videos of the kind of technology that they've built using the open source software and hardware that I've designed.
You start with this, it's like a roller coaster of feelings. You're like, okay, in the beginning, it's so exciting, it's feeling great, how am I gonna work on this task? And then you think of a solution that doesn't work, and then you just keep going down and down and down. I use this moment to push me through other moments that I'm having doubt in.
A major moment for me as a developer would be when I first got involved in open source and contributing back to my community. And a huge part of that was me sharing my work publicly. I get a lot of messages telling me that, oh, Gift, this thing you created really helped me solve this problem.
I love hearing about these moments of folks working hard to accomplish something meaningful. So what have been some of your biggest moments? Those pivotal points in time that define you as a developer? Maybe it's when you had an aha moment that finally brought clarity to a tough problem, or sparked the idea for something new. When a big project you worked so hard on finally shipped, or you learn that someone built something brilliant using your open source contributions. Whatever your moments are, the best way to achieve them is to spend as much time as possible in flow. Flow. It's that deep level of concentration and energy that allows you to deliver at your absolute best, when everything around you just disappears and you see nothing but your brilliant idea or that feature you've been wanting to deliver. But as we all know, the reality is that staying in flow doesn't come easily. For most developers, flow happens when you're focused on what you love most, writing code. Unfortunately, modern software development often means yanking you away from code and into boring, manual work that sucks the fun out of hacking on software and building cool things. For every spectacular yes moment you achieve, like when you finally ship that feature you've been wanting to deliver for so long, there are sadly many no moments. And those really suck. More dangerously, they jolt you out of flow and get in the way of making actual forward progress. Like when CI jobs that have worked for years randomly fail and mashing that rerun button just doesn't work. Or a colleague interrupts you, hoping you know the maintainer of a particular service just because you pushed a commit to it once 6 years ago. So, what do? Well, I have great news. We have a thriving ecosystem, not only filled with great software and a vibrant community, but also invaluable insight. And we've been working hard at GitHub to make it easier than ever before to tap into this incredible resource. For starters, there are millions of open source projects on GitHub that you can use and build on to help you be more productive. But I'm sure you're already aware of that if you're joining me here today. Instead of me talking about the theory of open source, I'd like to turn it over to a few folks to talk a little more about a very cool project they've been working on. It's the perfect example of how developers come together to address a set of common problems, share their work with the world, and invite others in to help.
So Keynote is the biggest real estate in Brazil, and we are totally digital. So we have solutions for renting and selling. My team is responsible to take care of the software scalability tribe. So the only way to scale our organization and our engineer team and quality is to stay on the flow, that people could do their best. For example, to focus on code or just on the core feature help us a lot because we can develop solutions to every step of the software development process. Being part of an open source tool and an open source community means for us because we can not only use those tools, but to contribute as well, to provide solutions and to be part of this environment. We highly use open source tools here at Keynote. So Backstage it's an important tool for us because we can improve our developer productivity, our developer experience, to collect metrics of our service. With platforms like GitHub and open source projects like Backstage, we are freeing up our teams to focus on their areas of expertise.
Backstage is an open platform for building developer portals. It was first open sourced by Spotify and later donated to the CNCF in 2020. At its core, a developer portal unifies all of your tooling, services, apps, data, and docs behind a single, consistent UI. Backstage helps you understand everything that's going on in your software ecosystem, regardless of how or where each individual component is running. We decided to open source Backstage to invite the community to help us solve these broader challenges of developer effectiveness together. The Backstage project lives in GitHub and its community is growing exponentially. Backstage was initially built by a small core team, but it really flourished because of the contributions from the developer community at Spotify. Now we're seeing the same effect with the open source community as well.
My passion about open source project is like everyone use your code, everyone review your code. Right now we want to focus accessibility and internalizations because there's so much people have some accessibility problems like visual epilepsy or sound or blind. I think it's more than important to create new features because you can create your product everywhere. You must provide a solution for everyone. Such a cool moment when you realize that something you have been working on and are so passionate about is being used by companies all over the world.
So this was my first time contributing to open source. And even years into my career, I was really intimidated because I didn't know where to start or I didn't know what kind of meaningful contribution I could possibly make. So with Fire Hydrant's plugin in Backstage, it actually was a really good experience. But once you got into it, you realized and you drew on your skills that you already had working on your current project, your past projects. It encourages other developers to be able to contribute and help grow this community as well.
So this project, built and open sourced by developers working for a Swedish company, has gained new tooling thanks to the work of developers at a US company, has been improved and made more accessible by a student in Turkey, and is now improving the developer experience inside of a company in Brazil. How cool is that? Thank you to Miguel, Natasha, Christine, and Erdogan for sharing why they choose to use and contribute to Backstage. And a huge thank you to the more than 1,000 contributors across 6 continents and more than 300 organizations who work on the project. While the Backstage platform is awesome, the global collaboration behind it is not a unique story, and that is a great thing. There are millions of open source projects powered by remarkable contributors who come together to solve common problems in an effort to improve life for us all. It's at the heart of what drives us at GitHub. We are stronger and more impactful when we work together. The numbers speak for themselves. There are now more than 73 million developers on GitHub, including 90% of the Fortune 50, making billions of contributions a year. That is a mind-blowing amount of code being written every day. But what's even more exciting is the collective intelligence being built by the open source community. Just think about it. Every project on GitHub has a complete record of its history, of how decisions were made, of how it evolved. This gives us all the ability to learn how to better solve current and future engineering challenges. What a time to be a developer. At the same time, it isn't all neon cat and unicorns. As you know, there's still a lot about being a developer that's not so great. There are constant demands of you with a seemingly endless stream of work, issues, and PRs. With DevOps, you're expected to know more about everything. Your environment is more complex than ever before, often with thousands of microservices and even more JavaScript frameworks to keep track of. So we need to use our collective insights to help each other automate and build software more effectively. Yesterday, you heard about GitHub features like Actions, Discussions, and Copilot, and how they can help you automate your workflow and leverage the stunning collective intelligence of the community. At the end of the day, it's not really about code. It's about people. It's people that make discussions light up with the best ideas and insights, that build and share actions to automate your work. And it's people that conceive of and build projects like Backstage. We have so many great sessions this week from developers around the world that tap into the insight and experience of others in the software community. Consider checking out B. Dougie's session on continuous delivery with Actions, or sessions on secure development later today with Jamie Finnegan from HashiCorp and GitHub's Gray Baker. GitHub's The README project is presenting a series of live guides sharing best practices by developers for developers on topics ranging from automation for code quality, developer onboarding, better documentation, and attracting contributors to your open source project. Emily Freeman will take us on a journey through the decades, exploring what comes after DevOps and how we should modernize and improve our processes to be cloud native. We're so glad you're here. And however you choose to spend your time at Universe, I hope you walk away inspired to keep pursuing those yes moments. The world is filled with no moments. The good news is that together, we're creating the tools, the knowledge, and the communities to reduce them. And just think, for every distraction or unnecessary step we eliminate, you'll have just a few more minutes to stay in flow. Those minutes quickly add up to hours. Multiplied by the massive community of developers on GitHub, we're talking about millions of hours of productive work. It's exciting to think about how this extra bandwidth will shape our digital future. So, let me ask you, how will you take advantage of your extra hours?
My focus is going to be around making sure that we get more projects out of Africa that the rest of the world depend on.
My dream impact with code would be to create a platform for underrepresented folks in tech where they could learn how to code through video tutorials and courses that I would create.
One of my biggest dreams is to just help people be the best that they can be.
The next big project we're working on is trying to make internet and data logging services that require almost no code at all. Like, how can we make it so easy that a grade school student can do it as their science fair project?
We're working on this new project. It's fuel management for airlines. This is amazing because not only are we saving these airlines a lot, but we're also saving the planet. Because if you reduce the amount of fuel that is being consumed, you're also reducing the amount of CO2 that is being emitted into the environment.
Focusing on growing the Chakra UI community. We also want to try to create more educational content to educate people to be more open, to help maintain the project, and also support everyone out there in the open source community.
Bienvenidos. Welcome back to day 2 of Universe. Are you all ready to learn more about how we at GitHub think about our interconnectedness of our growing community? As we saw in Erica's opening keynote, it isn't just developers, those folks who write code day to day, that are part of the community. The community includes an increasing number of stakeholders, such as maintainers, organizations, companies, and more. Because of this, the needs of our community continue to diversify. Yet something shared across the community has been the creative ways that you, the community, have been using GitHub to solve our biggest challenges. Y'all truly are inspirational. As a refresher to those of you who may be joining us the first time, or again, my name is Lorena Mesa, and besides being a Trekkie and large at life, I work here at GitHub in data security products as a data engineer.
And my name is Jared McCree, and I'm a staff product manager here at GitHub and focus on the enterprise needs of our customers. Thank you so much for joining us again here on day 2 of GitHub Universe 2021. So given that today is day 2, yesterday was day 1, and the theme of day 1 was Inside GitHub. There was an absolutely amazing keynote led by Nat, where he shared the GitHub vision along with the future of software development. We then had some sensational talks by our guests on code spaces, Copilot, issues, actions, discussions, and GitHub Enterprise. Now remember, if you weren't able to make any of those sessions, there's no need for tears because I have some happy news. All of those sessions were recorded and are available right now. Just go to githubuniverse.com and check out all of the talks we had yesterday, along with any of the on-demand content that we have available. So speaking of yesterday, as I said before, we had some pretty amazing talks. But funny enough, one of my favorite parts of the day happened after Lorena and I signed off. I got to watch some of those on-demand content, and one of my favorite ones was on the topic of communities. See, GitHub wasn't around when I was in high school or college, and it was super interesting to see how students and teachers use GitHub in their day-to-day. Lorena, what was one of yours?
Well, day 1 for me is marked by innovation. From the discussion around OSS research with GitHub's social impact team to the AI tools like Copilot, GitHub is helping us identify the needs and provide the tools so that together we can continue to support the community.
So speaking of community, your GitHub community is global and growing. We had viewers from 164 countries tuning in yesterday. I'm going to say that again. We had viewers from 164 countries tuning in yesterday. That's more than 3/4 of the countries in the world represented. And since we are a global community, those of you watching live with us today don't just have to hear this universe in English. The main broadcast is translated into 6 languages, and you can learn more by clicking on the FAQ button at the top toolbar.
Yared, gracias por la información. Como dijo Yared, si desea obtener más información sobre la traducción en vivo, haga clic en el botón de FAQ en la parte superior de la página. So, today, day 2 is all about our interconnected community. Jared, what does our interconnected community mean to you?
Well, to me, there's almost nothing more important than the people you share your life with. And when I think of an interconnected community, I think about how groups of people come together either IRL or virtually in order to achieve a shared goal. When those people are able to come together, anything is possible.
The community is a reflection of how we as stakeholders can collaborate to build innovative tools and practices to empower one another. Building better means leaning on one another to grow, learn, and build a better universe together. Now, what can we expect for day 2 of Universe? We'll have talks on DevOps, security, GitHub Classroom, and more. Like yesterday, we'll have our main broadcast available for you completely free. Then later, we'll have live interactive sessions, workshops, AMAs, and roundtables that you can register for. And yes, they are totally free with your GitHub account. By the way, this also unlocks a robust library of on-demand content that you can jump into at any time. Simply head over to the schedule and check it out.
Remember, we also have presenters and subject matter experts in GitHub discussions throughout the day. If you have any questions, jump on in there and ask, and we'll get you an answer. Are you having trouble seeing the video player or can't hear the audio? Well, if you're experiencing any technical issues, our team is here to help. You can reach support and discussions under the Live Event Help Q&A tab or via email at events@github.com. We also got some pretty great comments yesterday on Twitter, including this one from Julia Farah Aoli, who tweeted, "You know you work in an OSPO when the GitHub announcement of streaming audit logs makes you go, ah." And yes, that is what the heart eyes emoji sounds like in my head. So send us your comments using the hashtag GitHub Universe, and you may also see your tweet here on the main broadcast. Now, I know some of you are just tuning in, but don't worry, this isn't your only chance to see Universe. You can check out all of today's content shortly after we conclude by going to githubuniverse.com. So, Lorena, what's coming up next?
Again, today we'll be exploring our interconnected community. Coming up next, we have 2 segments that explore how GitHub is being used in education. And I know I'm really excited to learn more about it. That's enough, though, from Jared and I. Let's move on with the show.
Hello world, my name is David Malin, and I'm here in Sanders Theater at Harvard University, where I teach CS50, Harvard's Introduction to the Intellectual Enterprises of Computer Science and the Art of Programming, an introductory course for majors and non-majors alike. CS50 is among Harvard's largest courses, and indeed in healthier times, the seats behind me would look a little something like this. But the course is also freely available as open courseware, as CS50X, via platforms like YouTube and edX and beyond. And the course is additionally available to teachers in high schools and middle schools as CS50AP, a curriculum that they can adopt or adapt for their own classroom. Students, meanwhile, can take both before and after CS50 itself a whole suite of courses nowadays by CS50's team, including courses on artificial intelligence, game development, web programming, and more. All of these courses, meanwhile, are available at edx.org/CS50 for free. Now, over the years, we had to provide students with quite a bit of infrastructure in order to make this and now other courses possible, particularly toward an end to onboarding them to the world of programming without having to configure and install software on their own Macs and PCs, invariably then having technical support difficulties as opposed to focusing on the course's actual curriculum and the principles of programming itself at term starts. And in fact, if we roll back to 2007 at the time, were students here only on campus being provided with shell accounts on a Unix, later Linux cluster on campus for which they had a username and password and home directory, and as well as access to commands like GCC and GDB, because indeed the course introduces students to programming initially by way of C, followed by Python and other languages as well. But in 2008, we began to experiment with the cloud, which was one in its earliest form, and using AWS EC2 and other services did we replicate that same topology in the cloud so as to actually have more administrative and educational control over that same environment for just our students in the course itself. In 2012, meanwhile, just a few years later, did we begin to experiment with downloadable virtual machines, in our cases dubbed the CS50 appliance, a Fedora and later Ubuntu image that students could download on their own Macs and PCs, download something like VirtualBox or VMware in order to run their own CS50 environment on their own computer. Particularly enabling was this for the open courseware audience, who today could watch content, could read PDFs and the like, but they couldn't necessarily do the course's programming assignments or problem sets, not having access, of course, to Harvard's shell accounts here on campus. But with the appliance, were they able to work not only on their own computers, but even offline, actually engaging actively in the course's open courseware. But a few years later, in 2015, did we begin to explore web-based alternatives as well, to just get away from the process of needing students to install anything on their Macs or PCs, particularly in the context of schools, where teachers might themselves not have administrative access over the school's own labs. And so we began to experiment with an open source tool at the time, now AWS Cloud 9, on top of which we developed a suite of pedagogical plugins so that students could use just a browser to access still a text editor and a terminal window and all of those same tools, but this time requiring only a browser. And most recently now in 2021, have we begun to experiment as well with Visual Studio Code and its suite of extensions replicating that same environment, but also now aspiring to provide students with an offboarding experience as well, whereby students at term's end will now be able to download, once they are comfortable and have their footing in programming itself, VS Code and any requisite extensions in order to have their own independent programming environment, because indeed, if CS50 is the only proper programming class they ultimately take, they can at least continue developing even without any of the course's infrastructure thereafter. So in order to achieve all of these tools, we were motivated motivated by trying to solve just these three problems: enabling students to write code, to enabling students to submit code, and enable teachers like ourselves to review that same code. And underlying then all of those problems were a number of problems already solved. For instance, authentication, authorization, code reviews, container orchestration, testing, version control, and more. And even though we have had for years this tendency, myself included, this tendency to try to create solutions ourselves and implement our own homegrown solutions so as to get these tools just right, that's of course in tension with using something off the shelf, which while already developed might not do exactly what you want. But we've over time tried to find the sweet spot whereby we use as much open source software or SaaS type tools as we can, and then stitch them together using our own extensions and plugins and the like to create ultimately the UX that we want our students to have. And so in the case of these primitives, for instance, have we in recent years leveraged GitHub itself for all of these and more? For authentication, we have students log in via OAuth with their own GitHub usernames and passwords. For authorization, we've leveraged GitHub support for Teams so that TAs and students can have read and or write access to the same repos. For code reviews, we leverage the web UI's interface for pull requests or commits on which you can type per line comments. Container orchestration now comes in the form of code spaces online, testing via GitHub Actions, version control via Git itself, and more. And so within each of these environments over the years, have we also developed a suite of command line tools and later web tools as well that leverage these primitives to solve more problems for students in order to uplift them in the experience of writing code on their own. Submit 50, for instance, was one of the earliest of these tools, a command line tool that at the end of the day just lets students submit their code using Git underneath the hood, but without having to understand or wrestle with any of the mechanics of Git itself in that first week of the class, where they're still just learning hello world in C or some other language. But for the back end then of Submit 50, our students really at the end of the day pushing to a repo in our own GitHub organization, and they reference it by way of a path like owner/repo/branch/path that Submit 50 then uses to infer to where to push the code for students. In that repo, meanwhile, is there's just a simple configuration file that flags that path as a valid submission path that students can use, and within that YAML file, might there be the equivalent in YAML of something like a git ignore that prescribes exactly what files we do and don't want them to submit. Now underneath the hood, all Submit 50 is doing is essentially git add, git commit, git push, and the like. And even for resubmitting, do we even avoid merge conflicts or the potential thereof altogether by doing a bit of trickery as well, so that again, for students early on, is Git completely abstracted away, but towards term's end, particularly when they start to collaborate potentially on final projects, can we begin to take away some of these training wheels and have them use the native tools themselves. Meanwhile, to distribute students' own repositories and within its starter code, have we been using GitHub Classroom most recently, whereby students accept an assignment, which has the result of copying a template repository for them into our own org that they and perhaps their TA then have read and or write access to. Underneath the hood, meanwhile, do we then leverage webhooks or the equivalent thereof to use GitHub Actions, whereby we export a prescribed format for GitHub Classroom in the form of an auto-grading.json file that actually automates the process of running a suite of correctness tests, which in our case happen to use our own command line tool, but could really be any unit testing tool or the like. And for more qualitative feedback, do we leverage the web UI to provide line-by-line comments, as might be the case with a teaching assistant working more closely with their own student. And now in our case, for those automated tests, do we use our own tool, Check 50, which essentially just wraps a unit testing suite for C and Python and the like, but that too ultimately is backed by a GitHub repo. So a student would run a command like check 50 owner/repo/branch/path that simply indicates where in the web to go get those correctness tests from in order to run them locally on the student's own code. Now, in the graphical context, we also have provided students and built on top of these primitives something we call CS50 Lab, which essentially embeds a text editor and terminal window alongside a rendered markdown file, thereby enabling us and any teacher online to create in their own GitHub repository a learning experience for students that might have some starter code, might have some correctness tests, and might also have a narrative alongside it that ultimately lives in a repository indicated by, again, owner/repo/branch/path, inside of which too might be a YAML file for some minimal configuration, the README file for itself, and the starter code. And within that YAML file would just be a bunch of key value pairs that tell our tool how to configure the web environment exactly as that teacher wants for their own students. Also, graphically as well, within these most recent web tools like the IDE and now VS Code, have we wrapped the process of just starting the graphical debugger by a tool called Debug 50, so that when students compile and then run their code through Debug 50, does it trigger essentially a launch.json file in VS Code to get dynamically generated and configured so that the debugger is right there up and running without students manually configuring anything themselves. If you're familiar with rubber duck debugging, the process of talking through your logical problems in hopes of hearing any illogic with a rubber duck or an inanimate object, similarly have we built a VS Code extension that allows students to talk via chat with a virtual rubber duck, giving them hopefully a bit of prompt for finding their problems. And then underlying all of these tools is not only Docker, but now a devcontainer.json file, which allows us to specify a whole suite of configurations for students, like the extensions to pre-install, the Docker image to use, and the settings that can customize the graphical user interface they're ultimately using. Behind the scenes, meanwhile, do we use a suite of REST APIs in order to automate a lot of the processes, especially with regard to authorization. But ultimately, these and more tools are all freely available to students and teachers alike and documented at cs50.readthedocs.io. The courses themselves are all freely available at edx.org/cs50. And indeed, this was CS50.
Hello everyone, I'm Divya Vaishnavi and I have the privilege to serve students and teachers across the world with GitHub Education. Thank you, David, for CS50's inspiring journey, providing the tools and the infrastructure, making learning programming easy and reducing the onboarding friction. The lives CS50 touches is enormous. We have folks in GitHub, our very own Allison here, who's taken the CS50 class. But CS50 is not limited to students only in Harvard and Yale. It's a course for anyone with any background across the world. From Kareem in Egypt to Anirudh in India, who've been able to enter the computer science world with CS50 and build products and tools for you and I to use. Thus, partnering with CS50 and having GitHub solve some of their key problems has been a privilege. So what you saw was how CS50 used GitHub Classroom for assignment distribution and management, as well as auto-grading. And I love their unique adaptation of code spaces to reduce that key barrier of entry for students, environment setup. So what they did was created a singleton code space with CS50 Dev Container, all pre-built CS50 tools and dependencies, and students used that same code space on every subsequent visit, ensuring there are no environment setup issues. Let me tell you a little more about GitHub Classroom now, which is available for all teachers and instructors. It's a tool to automate and scale the assignment workflow. You can create and distribute assignments, so no more emails, zip files, or drives. Makes the access management really seamless. You can use auto grading to make grading process a little easier and automating parts of it so that you can concentrate on the core pieces of teaching. Gives you the ability to provide feedback inline in code. And all of this is managed in GitHub so that students learn the industry standard tool while learning computer science. Here's an example of GitHub Classroom where you can create and manage coding assignments, share the link of the assignment with the students and get them going. Once they accept, it creates a repo for them with all the scaffolding, that is starter code, feedback PR, and actions workflow for auto-grading, so that all that the students need to do is write code and submit. In your classroom, you can also import student roster, integrating with the various learning management tools, Canvas, Moodle, or many more that we support, or manage your TAs as well as administrators. Here's a view of assignments to see students progress and review their code, jump directly in the IDE and run the code, help them if they are stuck. I really recommend you to join the on-demand session, GitHub Classroom 101, to see GitHub Classroom in action and know more details. Teachers love using GitHub Classroom because it facilitates that collaborative and individual work for students, teaches them real-world tools, helps them scale their coursework to many students, as well as understand the sense of student progress. And we want to extend this power of code spaces in classroom to a lot more teachers so that you can leverage that simplified management, the power of config as code to define setup requirements for your class or assignment. Be confident that every student gets that same environment. No more, it does not work on my machine. And students get that same seamless getting started experience, a one-click environment setup. Thus, we want to partner with a lot more teachers like CS50 to shape this integration, learn from you so that we can serve more teachers and students better. So I invite you here to sign up for this pilot, partner with us, and once you sign up, we'll share the next details. If you're a student, we've got you covered too with our new offering, GitHub Global Campus. There's no better way to learn than do, isn't it? Hands-on experience. And thus, we have the Student Developer Pack, a bundle of 100 developer tools worth $200,000 free for you students so that you can host your app, accept payments, participate and create a virtual event, and even participate in hackathons. You can also become a campus expert and get GitHub support and training, or connect with a local campus expert and be part of your CS community. On GitHub Global Campus, you can also view events, local as well as global, so that you learn from industry experts around the world, from campus experts as well as hubbers. There are events in various languages, English, Spanish, and many more. Computer science is core to our existence today, and empowering students with these skill sets opens immense avenues for them and learnings that they can take in all walks of life. We at GitHub are here to help students, teachers, and schools across the world with the tools and the support that they need to shape the next generation of software development. So discover and learn with education.github.com. Thank you and have a great Universe 2021.
How cool is it that Harvard is doing this? They really are on the cutting edge. The CS50 Global Campus is pushing the boundary of not only what education looks like, but how folks can experience education, therefore making it easier for all of us. We all know that technology and software continues to innovate and evolve. An example of some of the folks that help us build more resilient and reliable systems are specialists in the DevOps space. Thinking out loud here, I'm actually not entirely sure where DevOps comes from. Do you know, Jared?
I don't know. All of these specializations? Like, how long have they even been around?
Hello, and welcome to Acme Inc., where the software of tomorrow is built today. Here at Acme, we implement agile software development, a brand new way of doing things. It really razzes my berries. So long, binder of requirements. In Agile, all problems are solved through sprints, chaotic 2-week segments of time where we promise to get 10 features done and deliver 2. Our developers write bug-riddled code and then pass the code off to our operations engineers via these mag tapes. Agile focuses on the people who do the work, like Phil. Come here. Phil here loads the code onto these big machines. It's an ultra-smooth process, and the entire engineering team works like a well-oiled machine. We're like family. You dig? Agile was groovy, no doubt about that. But not everyone was jiving. Now the guys, literally dudes, who created Agile had operated the code they wrote. But those jive turkeys weren't exactly chillin' with the network nerds and sysadmins. A couple smart folks came up with lean software development based on the principles of lean manufacturing and the Toyota production system. Here's the problem with lean manufacturing. We don't make cars. And with as many fires as we put out, the only kind of car we'd be delivering is the Pinto. Well, actually, no. But then Two birds of a feather were all about flower power, and they found each other in a hallway at a conference to talk about agile infrastructure. Eventually founded a network of global conferences called DevOps Days. These conferences brought together software engineers from every discipline to discuss how to make the clickety-clack sound as a pound. DevOps was all about people over process and process over tooling. And it didn't stop there. You feel me? Janet, lunch breaks are 30 minutes, not 32. Gonna need you to focus. DevOps was all that and a bag of chips. Over the next decade, DevOps grew to be an idea so pervasive that it's now a job. Listen, nobody actually knows what DevOps really means. I mean, that would make them an expert. Instead, it's a broad and encompassing philosophy that inspires diverse implementations across the industry. In other words, everyone thinks they're the only ones doing it right. I'm what they call a thought leader, and I define DevOps as an engineering culture of collaboration, ownership, and learning with the purpose of accelerating the software development lifecycle from ideation to production. DevOps enables engineering teams to reduce interpersonal friction, eliminate bottlenecks, improve collaboration, increase job satisfaction through engineer empowerment, and accelerate team productivity. How? Resume-driven development. It all boils down to the 5 tenets of DevOps, conveniently expressed in the acronym CALMS. Culture, automation, lean, hold on, it must be this darn Y2K bug. We forgot to fix that. We'll just say calm. There's also measurement and sharing. So bottom line, devs and ops, they need to play nice and learn things occasionally, talk to each other, blame each other for things so I know who to fire. Yeah, so, DevOps is good and everything's fine. But you know what? Calm is hard because I live in the real world, shipping multiple times a day, learning from what the real world throws at us, dealing with being on call, dealing with change, but trying to get just a little bit better at building each and every day. We're all humans. We build stuff, we ship stuff. We sometimes make mistakes. But when we talk, when we collaborate, and when we share, we can build great things together. I'm Emily Freeman. This is GitHub Universe.
Whoa. What was that?
Are we live? Are we back? No, I'm just playing. That was a fun preview from Emily Freeman. She'll be back at the end of the day for a super interesting talk on the software development lifecycle. If you have any burning questions about DevOps, be sure to add them into discussions. Now, let's take a look and see what's top of mind for some of our viewers now. So I'm going to read a quote, comment from Black Girl Bites. Quote, I started using GitHub in 2018 when I joined a boot camp called Resilient Coders. At first, I was confused about how to use GitHub. When I would make a mistake, I would just open a new repo and close that one out had I made a mistake. I didn't realize I could just create another commit or revert the commit. Like Camilo Garcia Larota, I was determined to have a green contribution graph. I wanted to show my teacher that I was taking GitHub seriously. I just enjoyed GitHub because it gave me a chance to read other people's code and see how I could make my code better. Over time, after I got my first couple of jobs as a software engineer, I learned a ton from my coworkers about resolve merge conflicts, rebasing, Git bisect, and GitHub Actions. Apparently, I felt so comfortable that I applied to work at GitHub, and now I'm here. Thank you so much for that comment, and y'all keep them coming.
Up next, we'll be learning how InnoSource is driving developer experience at the Royal Bank of Canada. On with the show.
Hello, GitHub Universe. It's an honor to be speaking to you today from Toronto, Ontario. My name is Anthony Vaca. I am the Senior Director of our Developer Experience and Open Source Program Office at RBC. At RBC, we are transforming the way we're working, and it's through InnoSource, which is our foundational project towards future, more active participation in open source. For those that don't know, RBC is a global bank with our headquarters here in Toronto, Canada. In Canada, we are one of the leaders of the Big 5 banks when it comes to customer service, offering award-winning products to our clients. We have pushed through into the digital space with over 5 million active mobile users. We are number 1 in market share in investments banking, private banking, and we are focused on helping our clients thrive and our communities prosper. Now, being at a 150-year-old bank, servicing over 17 million clients in over 30 countries, our 80,000 plus employees can become siloed, as you have thousands of developers building our leading products. Like any software shop, we also get stuck on problems, and we rely on our community to help solve those problems. Those problems can range from interacting with many internal systems, security controls, or processes that no one had ever seen before. So when someone asks a question, they tend to ask their team lead, who asks their manager, who may know someone else that has come across this before. The key is, it's very ad hoc conversations to help developers solve problems. And we have a great culture that enables that. But what happens when someone is in a remote team at the bottom right hand of the screen, and you're so siloed that that team doesn't have that support network? It gets very difficult. Now multiply that across a large organization, and we fall ourselves into that trap of Conway's Law, where an organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization communication structure. Basically, how we design systems may not make sense, but it works because its hierarchy is there. Having been with RBC for 17 years, in many different roles across the organization, we, like many organizations, have this problem. But in 2014, RBC went through a big change in leadership when we had Bruce Ross and Martin Wildberger join RBC to lead up our technology and innovation department. This new leadership started to modernize our tools, our processes, and one of the first things they did was they converged on one SCM tool, which was GitHub. In fact, I remember one day Martin, our Executive Vice President of Technology and Innovation, asked our developers, what else can we do to resolve your pain points? And people spoke up. Almost half of the ideas were about better culture and collaboration. People wanted open source, but inside the bank. People wanted that inner source culture. So after successfully driving an open source program in their previous companies, our new leadership didn't need any convincing about the power of open source. They realized that having an open source program office led to better software engineering practices. And today, open source actually has become a key supply chain of software for all large banks, with 47% actually making contributions back. So at RBC, with the inspiration of the Linux Foundation, we came up with a 4-horizon approach to our strategy. First, we focus on inner source. We needed to work on standardizing our practices, build that culture of collaboration, code reviewing, our branching strategy, and so much more. We needed to bring that culture of open source inside the bank. Because if we can't work together inside the bank, how are we expected to work outside the bank? Now, because a key principle of inner source is code transparency, open source code is an obvious supply chain of software that comes into RBC. So our second horizon is using open source safely and respectfully. Since we consume so much open source, naturally we make enhancements, fixes. So Horizon 3 is about contributing back to open source projects. It is the right thing to do, and in some cases, the legal thing to do, but we actually want to give back because it doesn't make sense for us to decouple our software, upgrade, and then reapply our fixes. We want to give back to the open source community because it's the right thing to do and it feels good to be part of a thriving community. And finally, Horizon 4. As we build better, well-engineered software, we want to lead strategically and give back to the open source community where it makes sense. But it all starts with Horizon 1, where our goal was to make GitHub our software collaboration marketplace for our developers. Out of the gate, we could not make all our repositories public inside of RBC. Our security policies didn't allow it for 2 main reasons. The first being projects were built for a need-to-know basis. there was no central place people could build and collaborate on reusable software. The second constraint was all projects need an official owner. At a bank, we can't have orphan software. If someone builds something, it's got to have an official owner. So to solve this, we created an internal public inner source org with only 3 rules that we negotiated with our security team. The 3 rules are: number 1, there are no hard-coded usernames or passwords. This just makes sense and is proper engineering practices. Number 2 is no client identifiable information. We're a bank, we need to protect our clients. And number 3, no code will be directly distributed to production. If someone wants to reuse a piece of code in our shared org, they'd either have to fork it, or what our recommendation is to package it and build it as a dependency. If you use the code, then you'd be responsible to maintain it with the rest of the community. So this org was the start. It was our big milestone to kicking off our program. And from there, it was fun. We started to engage with the community. We started to work on reusable projects that we thought everyone can benefit from. And through this, we actually defined what our culture means to us. And I'll share that here. At RBC, we want to be collaborative and experimenting, openly communicating about challenges and ideas. We are willing to admit that it's not perfect. We're always looking to grow and improve. We are energized by the opportunities. And most importantly, we're willing to give instead of take. This all sounded good, but I needed a way to measure this, because you can't manage what you don't measure. So we started to measure 4 things. We started to measure the Slack chatter. We started to measure who was attending our events. And as more and more people started engaging with us, we started to measure who's collaborating, who was participating in creating repos or contributing back to projects they never even heard of before. And with these metrics, we eventually graduated into reuse metrics. So here's an example of how many people made at least one contribution per month since the start of our program. Looking at our collaboration metrics from GitHub, we can see our social events early on was very, very lightly attended. But as we had our big community events, more and more people started working and collaborating on projects until we finally launched our reuse program. And when we launched our reuse program in 2019, we actually found more and more projects were using it, and it just started to grow. We can now see teams that are building in these dependencies into their projects and deploying them to production. As more and more apps reuse, the amount of reuse increases as well. So we can actually make better decisions on what projects to invest in, which are critical, and which ones maybe needed to get some more work or decommission them. So in the end, our apps are now starting to look the same icons, the same colors, fonts, and more. Our devs are reusing our security patterns, mostly because it's just easy and saves them time. So InnerSource has really started to transform the way we work. And if you've ever read the book, Crossing the Chasm, you know there are 5 stages we track in adoption. The first stage is the early innovators. These are people where you need to say the word InnerSource and they're hooked and they want to get involved. The second phase is your early adopters, your visionaries. These are people where you need to spend maybe 2 minutes with someone, explain open source inside the bank, and they're set. Then it's that dreaded chasm. This is the hard part of the adoption, because this is a big leap towards your early majority, followed by your late majority, people who maybe need a little bit more convincing, and finally your laggers and skeptics. Now, the early part is easy. These are employees that want the change, they want that culture, that community. This makes about 15-16% of your population. Moving on to the difficult part, this is where employees want the solution handed to them. They want the convenience for that community collaboration and reuse. And in our journey, we're now approaching our chasm as we take all the best practices we've worked together with the community on and scale them across the organization. And for us to get started, we really focused on building that foundation. And our strategy has really been, at first, be pragmatic. Make what these people want the reality. If people want the ability to do more code reviews or change their branching strategy, let's work with them to set all the foundational components. and prepare to scale. As we're scaling now, we're starting to look at building a reward mechanism. We're making it easy for developers to share and collaborate. We need just to train developers. We need to give them rewards just to make sure we attract that early majority. The late majority, there may be two things. They may not have the awareness of where reusable artifacts and where the collaboration happens, or we have to actually look at the technical feasibility. Maybe this won't work for all teams, but we're gonna try, and the late majority will focus on building those small, bespoke solutions. And finally, the laggers, the skeptics, is we just may need to push in a different direction. Maybe it's a management change, or we just really need to try to dig down deep why it's not working. But that's what our strategy is for the next few years. I want to thank everyone for listening, and I look forward to the discussion.
Wow, learning how the Royal Bank of Canada is using InnerSource to enhance developer experience is, to put it simply, pretty awesome. Seeing firsthand how organizations are learning from open source to increase their overall productivity as well as make the developer experience better is just one example where we can see that coding is truly a collaborative and social experiment. What do you all think about the intersection of InnerSource and the developer experience? Make sure to post your thoughts and discussions. Maybe there's something you learned that others can learn from as well. Or maybe you just have some questions. Either way, please share your feedback. If you want to learn more about developer productivity and lots more, check out the on-demand library at githubuniverse.com. Just click on the schedule icon at the top. You'll need to register, for free of course, to access the content. Up next, we have GitHub's own resident Beyonce, B. Dougie, GitHub's Director of Developer Advocacy, who will be talking to us about open source maintainer tips with GitHub Actions. However, there's something really special about this session. In the theme of our interconnected community, B. Dougie is here live on this stage for this session. I know I have some of my own questions, but if there's anything you would like to ask B. Dougie about Actions, drop them in discussions at github.co/Brian. Now, take it away, B. Dougie.
Thanks for the intro. And I am really excited to be here live and in action, talk about the two of my favorite things, which is open source and GitHub Actions. So jumping right in, I don't think I need to intro GitHub Actions at this point. If you haven't got this far, I have a couple different sessions on githubuniverse.com that I can cover that in great detail. But GitHub Actions is automation for developer workflows. And one of the projects I've been working on for the past couple of years is open source. Open source is a project that I always wanted to contribute to open source, but never knew where to start. And open source does that for me. Over the summer, we actually shipped an entire doc site, which is actually powered by GitHub Actions. So compiled and shipped to GitHub Pages. That's actually the workflow visualizer. And I'll get into more detail about that really quickly, but I want to actually briefly talk about my introduction to open source. So when I was a junior developer quite a few years ago, I wanted to actually solve a problem, and I wanted to solve the problem with Node.js and using webhooks. I did a lot of Google and Stack Overflow and found myself onto a GitHub repo. And at the time, I didn't actually know how to use GitHub. It's a safe space. I can admit that on stage at a GitHub conference. And I went to that repo, found the maintainer's profile, saw their email there, and emailed them directly. And lo and behold, they actually responded to me and gave me all the sort of secret sauce of the project and how Node.js worked at the time and all the differences. And they did that all during a K-pop concert, too, as well. They were actually traveling in Thailand for a K-pop concert, which I didn't know what that was at the time. I do now. So I wanted to jump in real quick, and I know Jared was here yesterday, and he was talking about he reps Atlanta, and I wanted to actually rep the East Atlanta Santa, which is Gucci Mane. And I built that project open source based on this one concept, which was an interview with Gucci Mane. If you don't got sauce, then you lost. And I just didn't know where to start. I was emailing maintainers left and right, which again, I didn't say this before, but don't do that. Just open up an issue. I know how issues work nowadays, and also discussions. But a couple examples I'm using for open source is project tables. So Mario was here yesterday, actually chatting with Jared about project tables. So definitely check out that feature if you haven't opted in for the beta. But we've been using project tables all month during Hacktoberfest, specifically in open source. And I wanted to actually point out this one contribution we had this month from MT Foley. I had this idea of, during Hacktoberfest, leverage linked issues. And linked issues is a way, if you're not familiar, it's a way to take an issue and then link it to a PR. And because sometimes we get some unwanted contributions or contributions that didn't have a lot of context, we kind of push a lot of our contributors into linking issues to their PR. And we're doing this today with the GitHub action. So linking issues, you just need to have that little flag. It's detailed in the docs. Definitely check it out. We also use issue forms as well. Issue forms is a great way to sort of centralize information to what we actually need. So like what browser you're using, what version of the project you're using. That's all helpful stuff to actually be able to contribute back, or even you can pick up that contribution, or I can pick it up. But all the context is right there in the issue. And then also GitHub discussions is something that I'm really loving right now because we've been heavily using GitHub discussions. MT Foley actually started this contribution with a discussion. So we had the issue, but he wanted to talk about this sort of approach and how to build this because we could have built it directly inside of the repo, but he actually took a different path. So we have an answered question on the discussion, and we actually answered a question with this GitHub action, which is super powerful to be able to contribute it to open source in a way that automates developer workflows, and I don't have to maintain it. So now MT Foley has this awesome action, which is a PR compliance action, and it checks to see if there's a linked issue. So now anybody who's doing Hacktoberfest or contributing in large projects, they can leverage this action in their repo today. The other thing that happened today, actually a couple weeks ago, is we have 10,000 actions in the GitHub Marketplace. And I was joking with MT Foley about this because he was so close to being number 10,000, but he didn't end up getting it. So check out that blog post if you want to know who got the 10,000th action. And a couple other things I want to mention briefly is reusable workflows. So reusable workflows is something that got covered during this event. It just got shipped beta, so check out that changelog post as well. But one thing I like to do is actually reuse these workflows in my GitHub action projects. And we use conventional commits. So all of our PRs, they actually forced you using either docs or feat or bug or whatever inside of your title. And if you don't have that there, which is super helpful because when I started open source, I didn't know what I was doing, and I had to sort of be coerced or forced into knowing how to rebase and squash, and then also write my titles and my commits properly. And this GitHub action actually does that for you. And the thing I want to point out is that this is an entire workflow that you can just copy and paste directly out of this project if you like, or you can use a reusable workflow by just pointing it directly to that URL. So I'm super happy that this is actually shareable. All this context is shareable. It's open source today. And then finally, something we shipped just recently is auto-generating release notes. If you've ever done any release notes, I highly recommend it. I have so many contributions and contributors who have context of where the project came from and how we got here through the changelog. So definitely check it out. There's that button right there. You can also power this through GitHub Actions. Just check out the docs on that as well. And then speaking about docs, not really about docs, but I've got a couple other sessions actually today about setting up continuous delivery with GitHub Actions. So definitely there's actually still space in this session. So sign up for that. And also check out my on-demand session. And then finally, if you want to find me on GitHub, I'm bdougie. Check out my MySpace profile that's actually powered by GitHub Actions.
Excellent. bdougie, that was an excellent overview of how we can all use GitHub Actions to make open source more intuitive. It's always interesting to me to learn how folks review open source contributions. There's such variety from project to project, community to community. So seeing firsthand how you are using such features as discussions, actions, auto-generated release notes, and more to build reusable workflows is a great way to help people think about bottlenecks that may exist in their day-to-day processes. In fact, that does actually lead me to my first question. How can maintainers manage their project in a way that the tedious things are automated and they can stay coding?
Yeah, I would honestly say start with the GitHub Marketplace. There's a lot of solved problems from verified creators as well as community contributions. There's probably a solution in there that you can help automate portions of your workflow, perhaps deploying to NPM or generating release notes. That's all covered in Marketplace. But I also just kind of peruse through a lot of large open source projects and copy and paste from their workflows too, as long as it's MIT.
Awesome. Y'all remember, bdougie is here to answer your questions. So please drop those in at github.co/Brian. I do actually have another question though. What is a great place for folks to keep up to date on those tips and tricks for maintaining projects?
Yeah, my recommendation is like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, so youtube.com/GitHub. A lot of this content is going to end up finding its way over there in clips, so definitely check that out that as well. But we also have been doing a lot of short video content around actions and code spaces, so I highly recommend like and subscribe and hit that notification bell.
Excellent. Well, I've got some more questions while we wait for some more to come in. So what is one of the most useful GitHub actions you've seen implemented that you wish people knew more about?
Yeah, so I briefly went past the project tables, but so Alex Page, who's a developer at Shopify on their design system, built an action called GitHub Project Automation Plus, and highly recommend check that out. So every time an issue is opened up in your project, it gets added to the project table. And I've been using that to power a lot of my work on OpenSauce. Also, side note, discussion number 207 is an exact question. So if anybody has any other ideas of good actions, check that discussion out too as well.
What was the discussion number?
207.
Perfect. What is then the most surprising GitHub action you used for your personal projects? Is there a workflow that delights you each time that you see it run?
Yeah, I mean, I create a lot of actions. I'm trying to cut back, going through a workflow, but I built this action called Take Action. So it's one of my personal ones, but it's also something I've been using during Hacktoberfest, where if anybody wants to grab an issue off one of my repos, they just type in .take, and they're able to assign themselves to the issue, and I don't have to worry about who's taken it, or if maybe it got stale, it just gets unassigned after a while.
Awesome. I think this is going to then lead me to my last question, which is, what inspires you the most about the open source community? And also, what's your favorite pizza?
Yeah, inspiration comes from how I got into as it being an engineer. All this information is available free, open source, whether it's docs or just seeing how code works. So I'm just really empowered and embodied by that stuff. And then pizza, Detroit style pizza, I'm on a kick right now, so don't at me. I think it is the best pizza right now. I love the crispy edges.
Well, as a Chicagoan, I guess I'm supposed to like Chicago deep dish, but that's not my thing. So, Detroit, I do have to agree, is a bit better. Well, on that note, Beat Dougie, as always, I wanted to say I had a blast learning more about GitHub Actions with you. I remember the first time I met you at Pi Caribbean, I knew that you had to be someone that I introduced myself to, because how many people do you meet that introduce themselves as a company's resident Beyonce? But more seriously, I knew that you're always a person who's happy to answer questions and can teach me a lot. So I'm really, really excited to have been here with you today. Now we'd like to hear more from you. More specifically, I know Beat Dougie does. So head over to GitHub Discussions and share your thoughts and ask your questions. If you want to know more about Actions, check out the live interactive sessions coming up later on day 2. A reminder that space is limited, so please be sure to sign up soon. Once you register, you can find links to access the sessions in your My Universe schedule and also in your email. Coming up, we have sessions from GitHub's Chief Security Officer, Mike Hanley, and GitHub star, Cassidy Williams. Did you know that Cassidy was her school's mascot the entire time she was in university? I really love that. Mike will share some best practices, tips, and tricks for reporting security vulnerabilities, and Cassidy will give us a peek into what life as a GitHub star looks like. We'll see you back here soon.
Hello everyone, my name is Mike Hanley. I'm the Chief Security Officer here at GitHub, and I'm excited to talk to you today about improving security vulnerability reporting. Now, let me just start with the obvious. Open source software powers the entire world around us and the ecosystems that we live in every single day. And because of that, the security of open source software and ecosystems are mission critical to the world around us. In order to achieve good outcomes in that mission, we really need to leverage the collective power of the open source community, of vulnerability reporters, of security researchers, of open source project maintainers, working together to make sure that vulnerability reports are really resolved as quickly and as completely as they possibly can be. And at GitHub, we believe that coding is social, but so is the security work that happens behind the scenes to protect those broader ecosystems. Now, we've taken the time to go back and actually look at hundreds of vulnerability reports that have cleared through our security lab and our research team and disclosed to open source projects every single year. And we've conducted a fair amount of research, also going out and actually just talking to maintainers about what's the experience of the vulnerability disclosure process from their perspective, and what do those interactions with vulnerability reporters actually look like, whether it's on GitHub or somewhere else. And through those conversations, that analysis, the data we've collected, we found really a lot of opportunities to improve the way that the security research community and who are reporting vulnerabilities to projects and also doing that original discovery work can work together with open source project maintainers to achieve that shared goal of getting to a good security fix. And in this talk, I'm going to take you through a couple of the tips there just to help assure that there's a positive experience on both ends of this conversation, and that we quickly address those security vulnerabilities when and as they are discovered. So let me just start with the first rule, and I think this is probably one of the most important ones, and that's just to establish the rules and norms of collaboration. And on the maintainer side, this is probably in the form of a security policy, and on the reporter side, this is probably in the form of a disclosure policy. So let's start with the first one. So security policy. If you're a maintainer, and regardless of how many available resources that you've got, you really want to make sure that you can clearly indicate to any potential reporter or contributor what and how you want to receive vulnerability reports. If you don't do this, the challenge for vulnerability reporters is that they have to do things like going and digging into Git commit history just to try to find an appropriate email contact to reach out to for a project. And in some cases, they may not even bother to take the time to do this because it's literally too much effort and it's an arduous process. And the negative outcomes that you can realize here is, of course, that this leads from everything from spamming the wrong point of contact to friction and getting passed around between people within the project to otherwise suboptimal public disclosures or things like a loss report. And of course, in the worst cases, this can actually result in basically dropping a 0-day vulnerability through a public issue or a public pull request. On GitHub as a platform, you've got the opportunity to actually go set a security policy for your project pretty easily and try to take as much of the ambiguity out of this process as you possibly can. This allows you to express your preference on, where and how you want to receive security reports. And you'll find that most security and vulnerability reporters are all too happy and eager to take that direction on when, where, and how you want to receive those reports, because frankly, it makes their life easier and services that end goal of how do we get to a good fix. Now, if we look at this example with systemd, you'll note that there's a couple things that are really important and helpful here. First and foremost is expressing their desire for non-public disclosure, right? So coordinating this privately, and then indicating an email contact to use to contact those developers privately to work on it. So short and sweet, clear and to the point. Now, on the research side, for you vulnerability reporters, it's also equally clear, we think, to be clear about what your disclosure timeline and expectations are as well. And a smooth collaboration between yourself and the maintainers are going to begin with your rules of engagement and expectations. Now, if you define and publish your disclosure policy, just clearly state, again, how do you intend to interact with the maintainers, the resolution that you're seeking, your publication timeline on when you'd like to be able to disclose. Again, it doesn't need to be complicated. I think short and sweet, just in the example like we saw a minute ago, promotes clarity on that front. And you can see that in GitHub Security Labs policy, which I'm showing you here, it's also pretty short. And frankly, you're welcome to copy it for your own disclosure process for your project as well. One thing that I want to highlight is you should try to be flexible and accommodate the reality that there's a variety of situations that you're going to encounter on open source. Be open about your needs, but also seek to try to understand the needs or the limitations or the challenges or the situations that the maintainer might find themselves in as well. And I think when you can take that empathetic approach of working together toward a common goal of getting to a fix, it's a little bit easier to find that shared ground to work on. And that's a good segue to the next point, which is, again, getting to that common goal of working on an effective report and a clear and durable fix as quickly as possible. Now, as the vulnerability reporter, be aware of a few things. One, maintainers are often working on their projects on personal time with no funding. Two, maintainers are receiving end of security vulnerabilities can be upset, stressed out, producing anxiety. They may have varying levels of experience working on security issues or with security researchers in the first place, so they may be sort of in unfamiliar territory. And also remember that maintainers probably are pausing a paying full-time job to jump on a critical vulnerability in their open source project to protect the people who are consuming and leveraging that as part of their other software. So as a reporter, I think just having a cognizance and appreciation and empathy for that situation and experience can go a really, really long way in terms of working effectively and collaborating on some of these issues. And a mindset that I would encourage you to take going into this is think of a vulnerability report as a contribution. Like in this capacity, you are acting as a contributor to a project. This is as important as the mindset that you would take to a feature or pull request or any other improvement to a project. And thinking about that as a contributor, and if you're a maintainer, thinking about vulnerability reporters as contributors can go a long way to helping set that relationship off on the right foot. What can vulnerability reporters do to make a good contribution, right? Like it's helpful to probably think through a certain set of things that make that better from the maintainer's perspective. And really it's all about having a very actionable report that's easy to verify, triage, and fix. I'm going to take you through a quick example to show you what that looks like. We're looking at a report from the GitHub Security Lab, and first and foremost, let's start with impact. Have the impact clear and upfront so that the maintainer knows what they're looking at and can start the process of assessing risk and prioritizing resolution. Here we see, we've got a pre-auth RCE bug. That's probably pretty serious. Being clear and upfront with that helps the maintainer bump that one to the top of the priority list in terms of working on. Second is having a POC or proof of concept. This is going to help the maintainer understand, how do I actually reproduce this bug? Like, what does this actually look like that I'm reading about in the report? That can be quite helpful if for no other reason than to just drive consensus on what is the impact, working together on that. Now, during this phase, the reporter and the maintainer are both going to discuss the impact. And both parties, again, just need to keep in mind that, if I think it's more important than you think it is, like just working on establishing that shared understanding of criticality, and again, using the POC and the impact statements can really help with that. Just remember, the reporter has no interest in publishing a fake bug, and the maintainer has no interest in leaving a critical bug unresolved. That can really help keep everybody working on moving in the same direction. Third, again, as a contributor, think about what can I offer that helps make this easier to resolve. And one of those things can be pointing out the specific incriminated code and providing a helpful suggestion on remediation. Now, it's important to remember that the maintainer is immersed in this code all the time and probably has a different or a differing perspective on how to best remediate it. But you should also consider that your contribution or suggestion here is valuable, even if they don't take it as written, because the vulnerability reporter, you in this situation, are going to have good knowledge of corner cases or remediation bypasses that may be unique to you as having a security research background and perspective from that particular role set. Fourth, again, going back and referencing the disclosure policy that you have, again, just to set clarity on the norms and expectations that you've got for the rest of the engagement. Five, I think proposing your help. So proposing to review the fix. So the third step, of course, is providing a suggestion for one, but independent of whether or not the maintainer takes that suggestion, in this phase, just offering to be helpful on it and helping to confirm that the fix is complete and ready to rock and roll can be a really helpful, again, contribution from your unique background as a security researcher. Last but not least, ask for a private patch environment. On GitHub, the maintainer can create that private GitHub security advisory, and they can invite the reporter to collaborate on that in private, so that when things are ready to disclose, the reporter will have reviewed and tested the patch and been able to confirm for the maintainer that everything is good to go. So those are some lessons on creating an effective report. Now, third big tip is really all around notification and downstream communication in a really effective and clear way. This tip's primarily for maintainers, but if you're on the vulnerability research side, I think it's important to understand this part of the process. And I said earlier that collaborative disclosure doesn't end with the report, and it actually doesn't end with pushing a patch either. It's really ending when you've got broad community-wide awareness and notification that the patch is available, it's critical, and what it's trying to actually address in the ecosystem. So notifying users of the vulnerability, giving them that path to upgrade to the patch version, giving them that clarity on what the underlying issue is and why it matters to them is really important. You cannot assume that the downstream consumers of your project are always just sort of blindly running the latest version of the product. Now, I'm going to show you the GitHub Security Advisory again here, because it's important to note that on GitHub, you can publish the security advisory that was private until this time. So GitHub is a CNA, meaning we're a CVE numbering authority. And the CVE allocation process for a security advisory is actually really, really straightforward, and it takes typically just a few days to go through it from start to finish. And when you publish the security advisory, your security advisory becomes available to the wider GitHub advisory ecosystem through the advisory database. as well as to the wider open source security software ecosystem through the CVE number. Now, don't forget, of course, to credit the vulnerability reporter for their contribution to your product, just like you would any other feature contributor who provided something to your project. Now, on Dependabot, if you're in a supported ecosystem, whether it's Go or NPM, your public security advisory will actually automatically trigger a series of Dependabot alerts. And the benefit of this, of course, is this does a lot of the legwork of notifying your project's downstream consumers about the exposure. And for projects that have enabled Dependabot security updates, Dependabot will actually also create the PR that will do the update for you. So you can just review the update, see what's getting patched. Makes it really, really easy for developers to adopt that latest and greatest and limit the long-term proliferation of the vulnerable versions of that code. So to just kind of bring things to a wrap up, really a couple, I think, important lessons learned. One, if you're a maintainer, just take the time necessary to create that security policy and just make known what's the easiest way to work with you, what your expectations are, etc. And also look at things like GitHub Security Advisories as a means to streamline that collaboration that you've got, that invitation to the vulnerability research community and really as contributors to working together with you on this project. And don't shy away from the vulnerability reports, and just keep in mind that those are actually intended to protect and improve the security of your project and the consumers and customers of it who are working with you. Last but not least, just the notifications piece. Notifying everyone who's using the project and giving credit to the reporter are critical steps in closing that out. On the research side, similarly, being clear about your disclosure policy. Be clear, but also be flexible. And part of being flexible, again, really just means adopting a maintainer-first approach that's one of empathy, flexibility, being helpful, understanding that maintainers are probably doing this along with a lot of other jobs, and just staying focused on the goal, which is patching the vulnerability and working in collaboration with the maintainer to get to that outcome. Now, let me just look forward to what's next. Two things I want to touch on here. First off, I'd love to come back to you before next year and tell you disclosure doesn't end with the notification of the vulnerability in your project. Now it ends with preventing this bug from repeating itself ever in your code or in the code of other projects. And for that, the vulnerability reporter and the maintainer can collaborate on a CodeQL query that detects that bug pattern. And these queries really act as a way of thinking about like a shared corpus of knowledge about all vulnerability patterns that we've cataloged as queries, and can help you automatically prevent them from ever repeating again in the future. Now, we provide CodeQL as GitHub as a free tool for open source, and we also open source all of our queries, so they're usable by everyone through GitHub code scanning. And we also provide CodeQL training from the security lab to help achieve this particular goal. Last point, really around private disclosure. We are working toward a paved path to support the coordinated private disclosure of a vulnerability report all the way through patch announcement for the open source community. We'll be working on this paved path, and we expect to deliver this in the next 12 months to give maintainers and researchers more options on how to receive and coordinate and partner together on resolving vulnerability reports through that private disclosure process directly on GitHub, the platform. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your time. Appreciate you joining us today, and I want to wish you happy, safe, and secure coding out there. Thanks, everyone.
All right, stars, thanks for attending this live session. Thanks for all your feedback on our product plans and for all the work you do educating, inspiring, and leading your communities. One last question. Think back to what questions you had when you were starting in tech. What advice would you give yourself?
What advice would I give to myself? Whoa! Hey! Oh my gosh, it took you long enough. Good to see you. You have done pretty well for yourself. I have so many questions for you. Shoot, ask away. Okay, yeah, I want to figure out how I can get to this as fast as possible. So first things first, what programming language should I use? It depends. Really? Yeah, you have to think about what is the rest of the team using? What specific problem are you trying to solve? What libraries or examples exist already to help solve the problem in that language? You also have to think about just what types of languages you might want to use. You might want to know some JavaScript in your career. It's generally good to know, but you also might want to know some more strongly typed languages like Java or C#, and dynamic languages like Python. Sometimes you need to be much more low level with something like C or Rust or Go. But when you're solving a problem, you have to try to use the right tool for the job and don't be dogmatic about it. Get comfortable using a few languages, and you have many tools in your tool belt to use, and you have less fear of picking up new ones. Always be learning. Huh. Tabs or spaces? It depends. What? That is not what the Dude Bros in any of the news groups say. They are so full of opinions. There's a lot of opinions that'll follow you forever. But think about it. Are you writing in Go or are you writing in YAML? Are they using editors that allow them to control the tab width or not? It depends. What really is evil is mixing them in the same file or passive-aggressively using that one thing while the team prefers something else. You gotta be consistent about it. I guess I shouldn't be evil. Should I use let or const for my variables? It depends. Object-oriented or functional programming? That depends too. Okay, strict, loose, or static typed languages? It depends. Dark mode or light mode? It depends. Windows, Mac, or Linux? That depends too. Joey or Chandler? Are you really asking me this question? It depends. Netscape or Internet Explorer? I bet it's Netscape. YAML, XML, or JSON? I gotta say, it depends. Okay, should I merge, squash, or rebase? It depends. Should I use semicolons? Depends on so many things. What branching model should I use? It depends. Okay, how much unit testing is enough? It depends. Vim or Emacs? That depends. On if you suck. Oh no. Oh no. Is anybody else out there?
Am I loving GitHub Universe? It does not depend. I am loving every bit of this and all of these sessions, and we want to hear from you. So don't forget that you can ask questions to us and on any of the content you've seen by going to GitHub Discussions. We have our speakers and subject matter experts that are primed and ready to answer your questions. Also, once the main broadcast wraps for the day, we'll have a series of live sessions on a wide range of topics for you. Also, we're loving hearing from what you're saying right now. On Twitter, @Muntchip says, the opening theme from Erica Brescia is flow, and I'm here for it. Making developers productive, removing paper cuts, optimizing for tiny wins to enable the big ones. I could not agree more. Hitting that flow state is just, I love it. So be sure to give us your comments and tag us on Twitter using the hashtag GitHub Universe. So we have some great on-demand sessions that dive deeper into the topics that you've seen over the past few days, along with some extras. All you have to do is register at githubuniverse.com and you'll get free access to all of the content. You can even add them to your own personalized schedule and watch them at your own convenience. Finally, don't forget to get your hands on some of that limited edition Universe 2021 swag. Head over to the GitHub shop at thegithubshop.com, where you can purchase some of those cool items.
Up next, we'll hear from Emily Freeman, author of DevOps for Dummies and star of Emily Vision, the delightful DevOps through the ages romp that interrupted our broadcast earlier. Emily has some fresh and novel ideas about the software development lifecycle. So grab a pen and a notebook. School is now in session.
Hi, I'm Emily Freeman. I'm the author of DevOps for Dummies and the curator of 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know. I am thrilled to be here with you all, and I'm really excited to share a sort of wild idea, a complete reimagining of the SDLC. Now, I want to be clear before I even start. I need your feedback. I want to know what you think. You can always find me on Twitter @EditingEmily. Most of my work centers around DevOps, and I really can't overstate the sheer impact the concept of DevOps has had on this industry. In many ways, it built on the foundation of Agile to become a default, a standard that we all reach for in our everyday work. When DevOps surfaced as an idea in 2008, the tech industry was in a vastly different space. AWS was in infancy, offering only a handful of services. Azure and GCP didn't exist yet, at least not publicly. The majority of companies maintained their own infrastructure. Developers wrote code and relied on sysadmins to deploy new code at scheduled intervals, sometimes months apart. Container technology hadn't been invented, and applications adhered to a monolithic architecture. Databases were almost completely relational. Serverless wasn't even a concept. Everything, from the application to the engineers, was centralized. Our current ecosystem couldn't be more different. Now, don't get me wrong, software is still hard. It always will be. But we continue to find novel solutions to consistently difficult, persistent problems. Now, some of these end up being a sort of rebranding of old ideas, but others are a unique and clever take to abstracting complexity or automating toil, or perhaps most important, rethinking, even challenging the premises that we have accepted as canon for years, if not decades. In the years since DevOps attempted to answer the critical conflict between developers and operations engineers, DevOps has become a catch-all term, and there have been a number of derivative works. DevOps has come to mean 5,000 different things to 5,000 different people. For some, it can be distilled to continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD. For others, it's simply deploying code more frequently, adding tests, security gates. For others, it's organizational. They've added a platform team, even a questionably named DevOps team, or have created an engineering structure that focuses on a separation of concerns, leaving feature teams to manage the development, deployment, security, and maintenance of their siloed services. Whatever the interpretation, what's really important is there isn't a universally accepted standard of what DevOps is or what it looks like in execution. It's a philosophy more than anything else, a framework that people can utilize to configure and customize their specific circumstances to modern development practices. The characteristic of DevOps that I think we can all agree on is that it attempted to capture the challenges of the entire software development process. It's that broad umbrella, that holistic view that I think we should breathe life into again. The challenge we face is that DevOps is an increasingly outmoded solution to a previous problem. Developers now face cultural and technical challenges far greater than how to more quickly deploy a monolithic application onto on-premises infrastructure. Cloud native is the future, the next collection of default development decisions, and one the DevOps story can't absorb in its current form. I believe the era of DevOps is waning. And in this moment, as the sun sets on DevOps, we have a unique opportunity to rethink, rebuild, even replatform. Now, I don't have a crystal ball that would be mighty handy. I'm not completely certain what the next decade of tech really looks like. And I can't write this story alone. I need you. But I have some ideas that I think can get the conversation started. I believe to build on what was, we have to throw away the assumptions that we've taken for granted all this time. In order to move forward, we must first step back. The software or systems development lifecycle, what we call ubiquitously the SDLC, has been in use since the 1960s. And it's remained more or less the same since before color television and the touch-tone phone. Over the last 60 years, we've made tweaks, slight adjustments. We've massaged it a little bit. The stages or steps are always a little different. With Agile, we bent it into a circle, and DevOps, we made an infinity loop. We've added pretty colors. But the SDLC has become an assumption. We don't even think about it anymore. Universally adopted constructs like the SDLC have an unspoken permanence. They feel as if they have always been and always will be. I think the impact of that is even more potent if you were born after the construct was popularized. Nearly everything around us is a construct, a model, an artifact of a human idea. The chair you're sitting in, the desk you work at, the mug from which you drink coffee and sometimes wine, buildings, toilets, plumbing, roads, cars, art, computers, everything. The SDLC is a remnant, an artifact of a previous era. And I think we should throw it away. Or more accurately, replace it. Replace it with something that better reflects the nature of our work. A linear, single-threaded model designed for the manufacture of material goods cannot possibly capture the distributed complexity of modern socio-technical systems. It just can't. And these two ideas aren't mutually exclusive, that the SDLC was industry-changing, valuable, and extraordinarily impactful, and that it's time for something new. I believe we are strong enough to hold these two ideas at the same time, showing respect for the past while envisioning the future. I don't know about you, I have never had a software project go smoothly in one go. No matter how small, even if I'm the only person working on it and committing directly to main like a maverick. Software development is chaos. It's a study in entropy, and it's not exactly getting any more simple. The model with which we think and talk about software development must capture the multi-threaded, non-sequential nature of our work. It should embody the roles engineers take on and the considerations they encounter along the way. It should build on the foundations of Agile and DevOps and represent the iterative nature of continuous innovation. When I was thinking about this, and I did think hard on this, I was inspired by ideas like extreme programming and the spiral model. I wanted something that would have layers, threads even, a way of visually representing multiple processes happening in parallel. What I settled on is the revolution model. I believe the visualization of revolution is capable of capturing the pivotal moments of any software scenario. And I'm going to dive into all the discrete elements in a moment, but I want to give you a moment to have a first impression, to really absorb the idea. I call it revolution because, for one, it revolves. Its circular shape reflects the continuous and iterative nature of our everyday work, but also because it is revolutionary. I am challenging a 60-year-old model that is embedded into our daily language. I don't expect Gartner to build a magic quadrant around this tomorrow, but that would be super cool, and you should call me. Instead, my mission in this is to challenge the status quo and to create a model that I think more accurately reflects the complexity of modern cloud-native software development. The revolution model is constructed of 5 concentric circles describing the critical roles of software development: architecting, developing, automating, deploying, and operating. Intersecting each loop are 6 spokes that describe the production considerations every engineer must consider throughout any engineering work: testability, securability, reliability, observability, flexibility, and scalability. The considerations listed are not all-encompassing. There are, of course, things not explicitly included. But I figured if I put 20 spokes, some of us might get a little overwhelmed, myself included. So let's dive a little bit deeper. We have long used personas as a default way to divide audiences and tailor messages, to group people. Every company in the world right now is repeating the mantra of developers, developers, developers. But personas have always bugged me a bit, because the approach typically either oversimplifies someone's career or needlessly complicates it. Few people fit cleanly and completely into persona-based buckets like developers and operations anymore. The lines have gotten fuzzy. On the other hand, I don't think we need to tailor messages so specifically as to call out the difference between a DevOps engineer or a release engineer, and certainly not between a security administrator and a security engineer. But perhaps most critically, I believe personas are immutable. A persona is wholly dependent on how someone identifies themselves. It's intrinsic, not extrinsic. Their titles may change, their jobs may differ, but they're probably still selecting that same persona on that ubiquitous dropdown we all have to choose from when registering for an event. I was a developer. I will always identify as a developer, despite doing a ton of work in areas like DevOps and AIOps and DevRel. In my heart, I'm a developer. I think about problems from that perspective first. It influences my thinking and approach. Roles are very different. Roles are temporary, inconsistent, constantly fluctuating. If I were an actress, the parts I played would be lengthy and varied, but the persona I would identify as would remain an actor, an artist. Your work isn't confined to a single set of skills. It may have been a decade ago, but not today. In any given week or sprint, you may play the role of an architect, thinking about how to design a feature or service, a developer, building out code or fixing a bug, an automation engineer, looking at how to improve the manual processes we often refer to as toil, a release engineer, deploying code to different environments or releasing it to customers, or an operations engineer, ensuring an application functions in consistent, expected ways. And no matter what role we play, we have to consider a number of issues. The first is testability. All software systems require testing to assure architects that designs work, developers that code works, operators that infrastructure is running as expected, and engineers of all disciplines that code changes won't bring down the system. Testing in its many forms is what enables systems to be durable and have longevity. It's what reassures engineers and leadership that any small change won't impact current functionality. A system without tests is a disaster waiting to happen, which is why testability is first among equals at this particular roundtable. Security is everyone's responsibility, but few understand how to design and execute secure systems. I struggle with this. Security incidents, for the most part, are what we call high-impact, low-probability events. The really big disasters, the ones that end up on the news and get us all free credit reporting for a year, they don't happen super frequently. And thank goodness, because you know that there are endless small vulnerabilities lurking in our systems. Security is something we know we should dedicate time to, but often don't make time for. And let's be honest, it's hard and complicated and scary. DevSecOps, the first derivative of DevOps, asked engineers to move security left. This approach meant that security was a consideration early in the process, not something that would block a release at the last moment. This is also the consideration under which I'm putting compliance and governance. While not perfectly aligned, I figure all the things that you have to call lawyers about should just live together. I'm kidding, but in all seriousness, these three concepts are really about risk management. Identity, data, authorization, there's lots of different aspects of it. But the question is really who has access to what, when, and how. And that is everybody's responsibility at every stage. Site reliability engineering, what we call SRE, is a discipline, a job, an approach, for good reason. It is absolutely critical that applications and services work as expected for the vast majority of the time. That said, availability is often mistakenly treated as a synonym for reliability. Instead, it's a single aspect of the concept. If a system is available, but customer data is inaccurate or out of sync, the system is not reliable. Reliability has 5 key components: availability, latency, throughput, fidelity, and durability. Reliability may be the end result, but resiliency for me is the journey, the action that engineers can take to improve reliability. Observability is the ability to have insight into an application or system. It's the combination of telemetry, monitoring, alerting, all available to engineers and leadership. There's an aspect of observability that overlaps with reliability, which is why they're neighbors. But the purpose of observability isn't just to maintain a reliable system, though that is, of course, important. It is the capacity for engineers working on a system to have visibility into the inner workings of that system. The concept of observability actually originates in linear dynamic systems and is defined as how well the internal states of a system can be understood based on information about its external outputs. It is critical that when companies move systems to the cloud or utilize managed services, that they don't lose visibility and confidence in their systems. The shared responsibility model of cloud storage, compute, and managed services require that engineering teams be able to quickly be alerted to, identify, and remediate issues as they arise. Flexible systems are capable of adapting to meet the ever-changing needs of the customer and the market segment. Flexible code bases absorb new code smoothly, embody a clean separation of concerns, and are partitioned into small components or classes. They are architected to enable the now and the next. In flexible systems, chained dependencies are reduced or eliminated. Database schemas accommodate change well. Components communicate via a well-documented and standardized API. The only thing constant in our work is change. In every role we play, creating flexible systems that will grow as applications grow is critical. Finally, scalability. Scalability refers to more than a system's ability to scale for additional load. It implies growth and a system's ability to grow over time. Scalability in the revolution model carries the continuous innovation of a team and the byproducts of that team within a system. For me, scalability is the most human of the considerations. It requires each of us in our various roles to consider everyone around us. Our customers who use the system and rely on its services, our colleagues, current and future, with whom we collaborate, and even our future selves. We have to read that code too. Software development isn't a straight line, nor is it a perfect loop. It is an ever-changing, complex dance. There are twirls and pivots and difficult spins. Forward and backward, engineers move in parallel, creating, I think, truly magnificent pieces of art. We need a modern model for this modern era, and I believe this is just the revolution that will get us started. Thank you.
So that's it for our main broadcast of Universe 2021. And over the course of 2 days, we've learned so much. Yesterday, we took a look inside GitHub to see how we're using GitHub to build GitHub. We saw how easy it is to onboard new developers to our teams because of code spaces, intuitively track and manage projects with issues, tap into the world's first AI pair programmer with Copilot, and safely deploy multiple times a day to the largest community of developers in the world through Actions. We think every developer in the world should be able to collaborate with the best developer tools, which is why we've also been making it easier for your company to adopt GitHub Enterprise with features like audit logging and enterprise managed users.
And as we discussed today, GitHub is all about community and the amazing things we can accomplish by working together, starting with our commitment to education, to reflecting from open source and applying those best practices to the broader development lifecycle. GitHub is here to learn from each and every one of you. It is each and every one of you that helps build what GitHub is today and what we together will be in the future. If you'd like to revisit any of the live stream sessions, they'll be available to view soon right here at githubuniverse.com. Jared, I want to know what were some of your favorite moments from the past 2 days. But first, we're going to go ahead and look at this recap from day 2.
Hello, and welcome to Acme Inc., where the software of tomorrow is built today.
Yesterday, you heard about GitHub features like Actions, Discussions, and Copilot.
So let's dive a little bit deeper.
We needed to work on standardizing our practices, build that culture of collaboration.
What kind of safety features are we engineering for Copilot?
Disclosure doesn't end with the notification of the vulnerability in your project.
I love hearing about these moments.
Yeah, I want to figure out how I can get to this as fast as possible.
In the graphical context, we also have provided students something we call CS50 Lab.
Netscape or Internet Explorer?
CodeSpaces is now the center of GitHub's daily workflow.
There are now more than 73 million developers on GitHub.
I can securely share access to ports in my codespace with members of my organization.
CodeSpaces is now the center of GitHub's daily workflow.
We have a thriving ecosystem, not only filled with great software and a vibrant community, but also invaluable insight.
And we provide CodeQL as GitHub as a free tool for open source.
And I believe this is just the revolution that will get us started.
How will you take advantage of your extra hours?
That poll is fake. Everyone likes key lime pie.
So, Jared, what was your favorite universe moment?
Oh my gosh, just one? Don't put me in a box. No, I'm just joking. I think my favorite part was the live sessions that we had with Mario and B. Dougie. Like showing a video of a demo was cool, but seeing it live from the people that are involved in the development is really something special. It gives me, of course all of you, the ability to connect with the people who are on the ground floor.
I could not agree more. What have you all thought of Universe? Let us know your favorite or not so favorite moment by filling out the survey. If you are registered, you'll find links in your daily recap emails, or everyone can find them in discussions under Event Help Desk Q&A. It is your feedback that helps us build a better Universe experience, highlighting the content that you want to hear, as well as exploring themes you are passionate about.
Yes, explore! There's so much content out there. The on-demand library is waiting for you, as are the interactive sessions, which kick off in about 30 minutes. Discussion pages where you can engage with your community and our experts. And of course, every second of our main broadcast will be available in our on-demand library for the next 30 days.
And although the event is not yet over, we couldn't finish our broadcast without a huge thank you to everyone, gracias a todos, who made Universe 2021 happen. And by everyone, we mean everyone at GitHub, everyone behind the scenes, our broadcast crew that is keeping the lights on the live stream link up, the graphic artists and web designers, our incredible performers and presenters, our experts taking your questions and discussions, and of course, all of you watching right now. You make this possible. Sí se puede.
Fatal, repository not found. Fix conflicts and then commit the result. Fatal, repository not found. Git, comment is not a good command. Fatal, repository not found. Fix conflicts and then commit the result. Fatal, repository not found. Git, comment is not a good command. Fatal, repository not found. Fix conflicts and then commit the result. Fatal, repository not found. Git, comment is not a good command. Fatal, repository not found. Fix conflicts and then commit the result. Fatal, repository not found. Git, comment is not a good command. Fatal, repository not found. Fix conflicts and then commit the result. Fatal, repository not found.
Finally, after much delay, the programmer completed Miranda. She was to fill out forms all day. She'd do whatever this programmer say, and this time they forgot to increment the form info array. What does this mean about? Well, this is what she filled out. First name, Miranda. Last name, Miranda. Email, Miranda. Age, Miranda. Address, Miranda. Phone number, Miranda. Any feedback on this form? When Miranda went to submit the form, to her surprise, she was met with her demise. It was the one thing she was afraid of. It read, type the characters above. But there were no characters to speak of. It was a captcha that thwarted Miranda. Oh, Miranda, why the captcha? Damn, yeah, you captured Miranda. still don't know how to get.
Clone, commit, diff, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, push F, push mid, push back, push base, push street, base,
Drives on fire, the fans go round and round again. My search is wide. When you run tight, it's an overdrive. I looked all over the drive seat. I thought that that's where it should be. That it would just show up, it would come floating up. Nothing to do with coin, that's never what would be. What are you gonna What are you going to tell me what those hashes are for? Find PIT. You can permission override. We can kill the malicious process. Do 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 do. sounds bad. It's something to do with the blockchain. I suspect we're not the only ones in this game. I suspect it's something to do with the blockchain.